Welcome to Engaging Experts, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with influential attorneys. Our guests will describe their practice and expertise. Then we will go deep on various topics related to effectively using expert witnesses.
Welcome to this special trial penalty episode of our podcast series, Engaging Experts. I'm Russ Rosenzweig, CEO and co-founder of Roundtable Group and the host of this Engaging Experts podcast series. Today, my guests will be Matthew Morr and Mo Khan from Ballard Spahr. We'll be discussing how Matt and Mo use expert witnesses in their litigation practice, and we'll also be discussing, really highlighting, their commitment to pro bono service, their emphasis on prisoners' rights, and their recent international press and accolades around achieving a rare commutation for a prisoner serving a life sentence named Robert Francis in the last days of the Trump presidency. And we'll also be learning a heck of a lot about the trial penalty. So before we dive in, let's have a quick word from our amazing sponsor, Roundtable Group, and myself.
This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Matt and Mo, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you both today?
Hi, Russ. This is Matt Morr. Doing really well. We're really excited to talk to you today.
This is Mo. We're really excited to be here. It's great to talk to you, Russ.
Well, thanks for being on my show, guys. And Matt, let's start with you. Tell us about college at the University of Colorado and how the heck you ended up attending law school and decided to practice law.
Well, I'm a Colorado native, and I've tried to leave Colorado twice, both unsuccessfully, and I've been back in less than a year. I went to Colorado College for undergrad, which is in Colorado Springs, and studied economics and politics, and had thought about going to law school for a good part of my time in undergrad. A dispute with my landlord, where I figured out she owed us some attorney's fees and penalties, made me want to go to law school a little bit more. But after I finished at CC, I went to live in Vail and work at the buyer's office for Christie Sports, which is a big ski retailer here in Colorado and in Utah, and do a lot of skiing. And I had a nasty wreck where I hit a clump of trees, and luckily I was totally okay. But when I got back to my place that night, I thought, I should probably start looking to go to law school or do something with my life, because this won't end well if I keep having accidents like this. So I left Vail. I worked for LexisNexis for a year and then went to law school.
Well, there's nothing better, in my opinion, than making career decisions while on the slopes in Vail. And tell us about kind of at the end of law school, what you decided to focus your current area of practice and specialization on, and how you also kind of made a decision to be immersed in some pro bono work.
So I was looking at both law firms and potentially doing a judicial clerkship. And I had interviewed with a small boutique law firm called Petrie Bauer at the time. And it was a collection of litigation attorneys that had been at Kirkland & Ellis when Kirkland & Ellis had a Denver office. And when that Denver office closed, some litigation boutiques popped up. And particularly Drew Petrie, the named partner there, I'd interviewed with him and really liked him and thought, this is a person I could go and work for and really learn from and have a mentee-mentorship relationship. and not to mention that even though it was a small firm, they were doing big firm work and very interesting cases, intellectual property cases, contract cases, and a steady stream of work. So I ultimately decided to go work with him at that firm. And in one form or another, the people I started working with at that firm back in 2003 or 2002 as a summer associate are people that I work with today.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I want to dive in shortly about expert witnesses and about Robert Francis. But first, let's talk about you, Mo. I'm particularly interested in your journey from college to Georgetown Law. I actually spent some time at Georgetown while I was interning for my congressman in the 90s. And Georgetown is the place that we decided to start our business venture called Roundtable Group. And the first 100 expert witnesses that we recruited from the ranks of university professors were at Georgetown. So I'm eager to hear a bit about your journey.
Oh, that's great. My journey actually started in Colorado. I did my first year of law school at CU Boulder, actually, and I transferred to Georgetown Law. But similar to Matt, I could not escape Colorado and returned back to Colorado because I missed the mountains and could not deal with the DC humidity. But I really did enjoy my time at Georgetown. I think the benefit and one of the reasons I don't regret going to Georgetown is because there's that field of expertise. There's just so many professors who are, the best at what they do or renowned for what they do. And that's kind of what brought me to Georgetown.
Very cool. The main topic of this podcast series is on usage and best practices for expert witnesses. And I've been excited to talk to you both because your firm, Ballard Spahr, was literally one of our very, very first clients in the mid-90s when we accidentally started pioneering the expert witness search and referral industry. And we have just this glorious long history with your amazing firm. And so I would love to hear any comments or thoughts you both have just on, before we dive into the pro bono world, just in a little bit more of a traditional commercial context. How often do you both need to find expert witnesses in the course of your commercial litigation practice? How important are experts in the course of your work? And, any other comments related to, that your peers might want to hear about best practices for finding and engaging and managing expert witnesses?
Well, first, I want to say that Ballard has really appreciated your help over the years. I know I've spoken with colleagues in Philadelphia that work on very high level, very complex cases, and with your help have found that the type of experts that they needed. And so we greatly appreciate that. And when thinking about getting an expert, I look at three things. And the first is, are they truly an expert? Do they know this area? And then the other two are more intangibles, which is, are they going to be persuasive? And then the third is related, which is credibility. And so you want someone that's great on paper, of course, and then you want someone that's going to put together a report that is a persuasive, well-written document and that they can defend on the stand, whether it's in a deposition or in trial. And the last part, when I say credibility, which is I'd like to think that all my cases are perfect, but they all have hickeys or some holes that we have to deal with. And so you want an expert that's able to deal with those issues and deal with them in a way where they are credible, but we're still ultimately able to push forward our themes.
Very cool insights. And are you able to kind of discern those things just from interviewing experts, or does it take, some time? Do you need to be engaging and working with them for a while first?
I think you need a little bit of time and you need more than one opinion. And so someone like Roundtable that can do some vetting and, talk to people that have worked with them, that they're expert before, that becomes really helpful. And I'll give you two examples of sort of contrasting experts. The first expert that I ever worked with, his name was Bill Carey. He sadly passed away a couple years ago, and we worked with him quite a bit on lost profit kind of cases. He was a certified public accountant. But what he also did in his spare time was judge mock trials and would actually take continuing legal education courses on persuasion, and just was very well read in persuasion and how to talk to judges and juries, and worked a lot on his writing, which is a CPA. I don't say it to be mean, but sometimes they need some help on their writing. It's informative, but not always the most entertaining. But he did a really good job of putting together narratives and putting together stories. And so when I was young in my career, I had the opportunity to work with him on some cases that went to trial. And he was such a huge asset because not only was he an expert in the field, as we're preparing for trial and working with him, he had the value add of being able to help us on our themes or narrow down our themes. He would watch our opening statements and to make sure it tracked with what he said. But then also for folks that have been to trial, there's a process where you start narrowing down and getting your themes and your phrases. And he was a big help in doing that. And so it was, as a young attorney, it was a great experience because, I got to learn from this expert and we, worked well together. And that, when I contrast that to, some experts that I've seen on the other side, where maybe that's not so much the case, where what they're doing isn't consistent with the persuasive story that the lawyers are trying to put together.
Well, that must have been so inspiring to have, maybe even a little rare, to have your very first expert witness just be, a model for excellence and self-study. And, it reminds me of my own undergraduate experience at Northwestern. I was on the debate team and, just had this privilege of studying with some of the great kind of persuasion and rhetoric experts of our era, including the amazing David Zarefsky, who was the dean of our School of Speech at the time. And all of that work I did back then is and your story really is inspiring us, Matt, as we, as a company here, begin our second 25 years to actually start focusing more on training and education for experts. There's just, a lot of excellent experts out there who aren't necessarily excellent expert witnesses. So one of our goals here, and maybe you and Mo can help, is, to really equip experts with, there's just such cutting edge new training and theory out there on persuasion and rhetoric, and how, experts can just really dazzle with excellence in the context of report writing and deposition prep and, of course, trial performance. So those are topics that we'll definitely be covering in some upcoming podcasts.
Well, it's really important. Another one that I think people need to think a lot about is body language. And so one of the best cross-examinations I've ever seen was by my partner, Drew Petrie, on an expert in a lost profits case. And when the direct examination was happening, the expert witness, was sitting with great posture and seemed very confident. And in cross-examination, Drew Petrie, the first two questions, basically he was able to impeach him. And as the examination went on, the guy's posture got worse and worse and worse, to the point that by the end of the examination, he was practically hiding behind the witness stand.
Wow.
So the jury is only seeing, his eyes and the top of his head. And, he's not looking at anybody in the eye. And there was nothing that could be done on redirect because the guy's body language told the story.
Right. So important. There's even a book I like out there called What Everybody is Saying. That's just a really great primer on effective use of body language, especially for expert witnesses. Mo, do you have anything to add just on the topic of, techniques, best practices, checklists for kind of mastery for litigators in the use of expert witnesses?
I think when looking for an expert, what Matt has said, it's important. You need to kind of look at two sides of what the expert is going to do. They're going to be preparing your expert report, and so you want a good persuasive writing. But I think a lot of times what's not taken into consideration at the initial stage is you also want a good witness, not just someone who can give you a good expert report. And so I think the vetting at that process to find someone who will be a good witness is really important.
Quite right. Well, I am really eager to dive in with you both on the trial penalty and the trial penalty clemency project and Robert Francis and NACDL and former President Trump. And I guess my first question before we really dive in is, how the heck do you guys even have time for pro bono work, prisoners' rights work? Because you're both, elite, litigators at a top firm. Just tell us about the culture of pro bono work at Ballard Spahr and, your desire to focus on that.
Pro bono work is a key part to Ballard Spahr's culture. And so when I got over here about 7 years ago, and coming from a small firm to a big firm, one of the first things I noticed was we actually had a pro bono coordinator. And the pro bono coordinator was the chairman of the firm's wife, Mary Gay Scanlon, who's now in Congress out of Pennsylvania. And so that immediately said to me, Ballard Spahr takes pro bono seriously. The other piece of it is, like all law firms, we have hourly goals and expectations, and pro bono hours count towards those hourly goals. And so I'm on the associate evaluation committee, and one of the things we look at is people's productivity. And a pro bono hour is treated exactly the same as an hour for the biggest client of the firm, because they take it seriously and really believe that as lawyers, it's our job to give back where we can. And so, you asked how did we find the time? We're fortunate in that the firm supports us in finding that time, and views it as really critical to the development and success of lawyers.
Well, it's really inspiring. And I hope other top lawyers who are listening will use this as a model for expanding their pro bono practice. It's really important to us as a company, too. We really pride ourselves on helping as much as we can when any of our clients are doing pro bono work, and also might need expert witnesses, because that's where we really love to shine, and we do that work free of charge. And I'm keen to hear from you both within the context of that kind of excellent pro bono culture. How did you decide upon spending time on prisoners' rights? How did you come across the trial penalty clemency project? How did you find NACDL? What does that stand for? And, give us any background and context on how you ultimately decided to help Robert Francis.
So the NACDL is the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. And Ballard Spahr has, since I've been with Ballard Spahr, worked with the NACDL on pro bono projects. So, for example, at the end of the Obama administration, there was a clemency project where Ballard lawyers partnered with the NACDL to try and petition for nonviolent offenders to receive clemency. And over 100 Ballard lawyers worked on that project, and Ballard Spahr received clemency for 29 imprisoned people.
Wow.
So helped 29 people
Incredible.
become free.
Wow.
I had worked on that and submitted a petition, and the person I submitted the petition for was in prison for drug charges that under today's standards probably wouldn't even be a misdemeanor, but he hit the 3 strikes and you're out.
Right.
Unfortunately, on one of those arrests, there was a weapon in the house, so it was deemed violent, a violent crime. Debatable, but ultimately we did not get the clemency for this gentleman, which pro bono case, but really one of the biggest losses I've had in my career.
Right.
And so this past summer, I received a call from our pro bono coordinator, and she asked if I was interested in trying another one of these clemency petitions. And recognizing that this administration, it might be a little bit harder than under the Obama administration, but a different strategy with the right to a trial piece. And so I volunteered and said I'd be happy to do it. Mo and I had just finished a couple months ago working on a really hard and stressful commercial case.
Mm-hmm.
And, the kind of case where you see a little bit of the underbelly of the legal world, where maybe opposing counsel was taking positions that weren't too honest. And it very stressful for both of us. And so I asked Mo to help me because I really wanted to give him an opportunity to work on the better side of I shouldn't say better. Give him an opportunity to really try and do some good for the world. And he jumped right in and did just an absolutely fantastic job in researching Mr. Francis's underlying case and coming up with the arguments that ultimately got him out of prison.
Amazing. Let's talk for a sec just a little bit more about the trial penalty, because many of our listeners are non-lawyers. They're merely business leaders like me. And I was just so bothered and moved by this concept when Matt was explaining it to me a few weeks ago. Give us a little bit more color on the trial penalty. Is this common? Is it still happening these days? Is it legal? Give us a little bit more context.
To answer your first question, it's still happening these days. The trial penalty, basically the root of the trial penalty is in prosecutorial discretion. Prosecutors have the ability to charge defendants with various crimes and enhance those crimes based on certain factors. So in Robert Francis's case, the trial penalty, his initial charges were nonviolent drug conspiracy charges. His plea offer was 25 to 30 years, but if he didn't accept the offer, the prosecutor threatened to enhance the amount of drugs in the charge. So the prosecutor has power to kind of adjust the charge and the severity of the charge. And through that power, you can threaten someone to discourage them to go to trial and settle, or give them a harsher sentence if they do go to trial. Unfortunately, there aren't many arguments that are per se that it's illegal in terms of jurisprudence that's currently existing. That being said, this is why the work that the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers is doing is really important, because this does affect someone's right to trial. It's coercive in that it discourages them to go to trial, even when they have meritorious arguments to go to trial, because there's always this risk that they could, in Robert Francis's case, go to prison for life.
Anything to add, Matt, on the trial penalty?
The only thing that I would add is it really implicates your constitutional rights under the Sixth Amendment and the right to trial and a right to a fair trial. And so just from looking at a fairness standpoint, if someone's really looking at an enhanced punishment and life in prison for Mr. Francis by using his right to have a jury of his peers decide whether he's guilty or not guilty, it seems very unfair. And I think it was for Mr. Francis, and I'm very glad that he's free today.
Okay, Mo, so I'd like to hear a little bit more about what the communications were like with Robert Francis. First of all, when he first learned that, a famous elite law firm would be representing him. Second, what your communications with him were like kind of throughout the process. And third, most excitedly, like what he said when he heard the good news.
We had various forms of communication with Robert throughout the process. When we first started representing him, and how we informed him of representing him was via email communication. But throughout that process, before his petition ended up ultimately being granted, he put me in contact with his sister. And so I kept his sister also involved and got information from her throughout that process. And then finally, we were able to actually talk with him in person on the phone once he was released from prison. And we talked to him the day after he was released from prison.
Wow.
And I also talked to his sister the day we found out he was getting released. And both conversations were pretty amazing. The conversation with his sister occurred the day we found out he was getting released, and she had no idea that it was even possible. She had no words, and
wow.
She was crying, and you could hear her yelling at all of her family members, telling all her family members, Robert's getting out, Robert's getting out.
Oh my God.
And the amount of disbelief and just shock, but also gratefulness, it's inexplicable. And then the next day, talking to Robert himself is also is just pretty amazing and pretty hard to put into words how amazing it is. Matt and I both gave him a call. He had just gotten released from prison, and he told us, how grateful he was to us, and that he was able to hold his grandson for the first time.
Wow!
His grandson was born while he was serving his sentence.
Wow!
And he was saying, it's crazy that I'm able to, look out and look outside, and
wow,
not from a prison cell. And it was just, it's pretty amazing to know that, we helped someone, get out of prison. And he's now at home and not in prison versus, before he was sentenced to life.
This is just so inspiring, Mo. A lot of my friends who are lawyers tell me that they entered the field of law to try to change things, to try to change people's lives. And most of them don't, but you guys did. So congratulations. What a story.
Well, thank you. I will never forget the phone call we had with him, because even over the phone, you could feel the pure joy that he had for being home, for getting out of prison. And he talked about how, being in prison, he would have dreams about being at home, and then he'd wake up and realize he was still in his cell. And that, he kept pinching himself because he was saying, this is real. It's not a dream. And just incredibly gracious, incredibly nice. And he said, what can I do for you guys? What can I do? And, both of us said, look, live a good life. You make the most of your life. We were just happy to help you and give you the help that you deserved. As a Denver sports fan, I knew that he was a California sports fan, so I made one request that he switch his allegiance to the Denver Nuggets and the Denver Broncos. And as happy as he was, he politely declined.
So, I was just so moved by this, guys. Roundtable Group actually made like a donation to the NACDL in your honor after we heard this story. And, a lot of our listeners are themselves litigators or business executives. What advice would you have for our listeners who are similarly moved by the harsh realities of the trial penalty concept and who might want to get involved with commutation or prisoners' rights work?
I think the best place to go is the NACDL. And first, and before, I should also say thank you very much for the donation. I know the organization greatly appreciated it, and we also really appreciated you doing so and on our behalf. Very nice thing of you to do.
Of course. But, fellow litigators can do even more than a little donation. So anything else, Mo or Matt, that, you would suggest to your peers, colleagues, just around engaging more in this area?
I would echo what Matt had mentioned, getting in contact with the NACDL. They are currently looking for individuals to work on these petitions, and any help that they can get, they're willing to take on these petitions. And it doesn't even have to be litigators. We have real estate attorneys who've worked on these petitions as well. But I think it is a good way, particularly for litigators, to branch out and get a different sense, or work on different matters than the general run-of-the-mill commercial litigation matter.
So, guys, last question. When you're not busy, freeing inappropriate life sentence prisoners and engaging in elite commercial litigation work, what do you like to do outside of work? Mo, you first, and then Matt.
Well, like Matt, I have 2 dogs. So being in Colorado, we go on a lot of hikes. And then also recently I've been I've been taking skiing lessons. So I'm getting better.
Matt, you still on the slopes regularly, or did that accident kind of change your favorite sport?
No, I'm still on the slopes regularly. I ski quite a bit, and since I turned 40, I compete every year in the Masters division of the Taos Freeride Ski Championships. So basically, like an extreme skiing contest at Taos that I do every year. My wife would probably like me to stop. Just days before the world changed from the pandemic, on March 6th of 2020, I actually broke my leg in the competition. But I'm all healed and had a great ski season.
Awesome. Well, that makes 3 of us who are passionate about skiing. Not so much the extreme part for me, but all the rest of it. Taos and Val are 2 of my very favorite places in the whole world. So, hey guys, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm very, very grateful. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you for having us. And again, thanks for all the work that your company does for Ballard.
Thanks, Russ.
It's an honor. Thank you both.
Thanks for listening to Engaging Experts. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss our future episodes.